So continuing on our user provisioning scenarios, we're going to move to a second scenario where we're going to hire some additional employees. But before we do that, we're going to make some changes to show how easy it is to configure Rapid Identity to act in a different manner. So the first thing we're going to do is create some additional OUs in our audit tree. So basically we've created a high school container, but we want users to actually go into a users container below high schools. Now to support our query-based provisioning or query-based placement, we need to add in our department number for the high school in the high school OU. The next thing we need to do is go to modify some of the options in our drivers. So the first driver we're going to change configuration on is the employees driver. And we're going to change our naming convention. We're going to go away from employee ID and use a name-based user ID. And then we'll change our initial passwords to be attribute-based, and the password will be set to match the value of CN. So anytime we make a change to that, we need to deploy that driver. And we're also going to go to our Linux loopback driver and make a configuration change. The sysadmins didn't like us using 100 for the GID, so now we're going to make it 1000. And again, we need to deploy that driver. And now we're also going to change our placement criteria for our eDirectory driver. We're still going to do query based, but instead of using the value of employee type, we're going to use the value of department number. And we also need to add a suffix. So our query is going to return the high school container, but we want all users to be placed in the users container that exists within the container where their department number value would be stored. So again, we need to deploy our driver. So briefly, we'll look at the file that we're going to run. So we mentioned that we're going to do the name-based naming convention. And the naming convention for the script, the business logic for the names are initially, let's try first initial last name. So we'll see that Kimberly Griffin is going to be created as K Griffin. Now the next user, Karol Griffin, is also K Griffin. So our next rule will be use the first initial of the first name and then the middle initial, which in this case is D, and then the last name. So Karol will be KD Griffin. And then we have Katy Griffin, who also has a D for the middle initial. So our next rule will say use the first two initials of the first name followed by the last name. So Katy will be KA Griffin. And then Kelly Griffin, who is a K Griffin with D, but KE is unique, so she'll be KE Griffin. And then finally Kenneth Griffin, who also has the middle initial of D. And since KE is taken, we'll revert back to first initial last name with an incremental number. So Kenneth will be K Griffin 1. Now if we come back to console 1, we can start refreshing and see the names being generated. So we can see, for example, K Griffin was created, and then KD Griffin was created, and then KA Griffin. So we're guaranteeing uniqueness of the usernames. Now, all of these K Griffins, well, most of them are teachers and one's an assistant principal, all reporting to Blake Sylvester, who is the principal of our high school. So one thing we'll check, because of our change in our Linux loopback driver, is notice we changed the default for the GID number. So now everyone has a default GID number of 1000. But our unique ID is still incrementing for everyone and is guaranteed unique. So again, there's a GID number the same and a unique UID number. Now our managers group has also been updated because now we already had Shana reporting to Troy, so that's why Troy was a manager. Now when Blake was added, he reports to Shana, so now Shana's a manager. And then all the other users report to Blake, so now Blake is added as a manager as well. So to get an idea of what that looks like here, first we'll log in as Blake Sylvester, and also the initial password is no longer static, so his password should be equal to his username, so it's also B Sylvester. And so that worked, and we also need to fix our expired password. So when Blake logs in, we can see all the K Griffins reporting to him. And of course, he reports to Shana, who reports to Troy. So Blake is a manager, so if he goes to requests and approvals, he has the teamwork. Now initially when we logged in as Shana, she was not a manager at that time. But now she is, and so she's been given the team functions within user app. Now, as you remember, we created the high school and users containers to place these new high school employees. So if we go to users, there we see that they are created in the correct place, simply because we changed the configuration. No code changes whatsoever. And if we go to Active Directory, before everyone was placed in admin, if we refresh, they're not there. But instead, they're all placed in schools because the business logic for placement for Active Directory doesn't have to match what it is for eDirectory. So in this case, the schools is where all high school employees are to be placed. And here you notice that, again, the names are based on their true name. But something that's a little unique here is Ken Griffin is really, his legal name is Kenneth, but we chose that if the preferred name is provided, then we'll use that as the preferred display name, whereas Kenneth is still listed as their first name. And we also see here that the email was created and they're provisioned in Exchange. So if we come back out to Ken Griffin, we'll see that he's given an email address as well.